Hey, what's up, everyone? Zach Miller here, the host of the 1004 Show. It's episode 71 with Georgie Márquez of Andre Marquez Architects. Have you ever, thought about getting married? Well, Georgie did, and she did get married. But then she decided to start a business with her husband. So we deep dive into that experiment and how, after a few decades, it's still going strong. It's episode 71 of the 1004 Show. We talk a lot about marriage and business, but then also how women are finally getting recognized in the workplace. It's episode 71 of the 1004 Show. Take a look. You started a business that involves your husband.
Yes.
Were you guys married when you guys started the business?
Yes, we were.
How long had you been married at that point?
At that point, probably about 10 years.
Wow. So
Yeah.
10 years, you've gotten over the honeymoon. You probably understand that, hey, he's the right one.
Right.
When did you decide to create a second marriage and start a business with
The
him?
second marriage. We had moved to Virginia from New York. We went to school in New York. We met in New York. We lived in New York. We worked in different firms in Manhattan for several years before we moved down here. And then we were working for different people. And I think we always knew that at one point we would start the business. And it sort of happened that it was more at that time Joel's vision. Our son was little, so I was very busy, but we started it out of the room above the garage. So it was really convenient. I could work at home. Clients would come prancing through the house and up the stairs in the back, and we just started doing small commercial work, and it just grew from there. We were in the room above the garage for about 3-4 years. Then we moved into some shared space with some other companies. At one time, we were with an engineering firm that gave us space, and then we've been at this location now for about over 10 years now.
How long were you in the shared space?
In the shared space, we were probably about 4.
4 years. So you guys are almost 2 decades old, you'd say?
This June will be 25, which is kind of like amazing. Like, how did that happen?
Wow.
So, yeah,
That's
25 years. Yeah.
It's crazy. For someone that might be thinking about, oh, I got to work above my garage or at my house, how did you kind of emotionally get through that? Because I think that's the hard part. Like, I don't want someone walking through my house.
Um, I guess a lot of what we do, we really don't meet the clients at our house. So that wasn't a big issue. The clients that would come to the house were longer term clients. Um, if I were to do it again and it was going to be more serious, I would probably have changed. This is the architect speaking. I would have changed some of the layout. I would have probably created a space downstairs where we could have had meetings.
Got it.
Maybe turned the dining room into more of a lounge space that you can meet. Nowadays, you don't need to meet in an official office space. So you can create a lounge environment that could be what normally people have called formal living rooms, and make it in a way that you can use it as a formal living room, but it's actually a meeting space for your clients.
So 25 years ago, people were a little apprehensive about this style. It doesn't matter. Just
Yeah,
meet wherever. We're seeing
right,
everyone on
exactly.
we're seeing everyone on a cell phone anyway.
Right.
What is AMA?
It's Andre Marquez Architects. So it's Joel Andre, which is my husband, and then I'm Georgie Márquez. It's funny because we decided to go with both our last names and not realizing that a lot of people think that my husband's first name is Andre and his last name is Marquez. And so we many times have to clarify that no, it's both of us and it's both our last names, and he's not a Marquez, he's an Andre. So that's, we've been doing architecture. We do a wide range of projects, and we just make it happen. We enjoy it. We have our different strengths, and that's how we make it work.
I think a lot of people that go into business and maybe too soon don't understand the world that they're getting into, and not necessarily just the business world, also not being skilled enough in that kind of world. It seems like you guys had been in the architectural world for a while before you decided to start the business. How important was that by learning the industry before actually then diving in 25 years ago?
I'll tell you, the architecture part in some ways was the easiest part. We had been working in different offices. We had mostly worked in small offices. So that's been our culture from the time we graduated. We both, for a while, we worked actually in the same firm in Brooklyn. And then later on, we ended up working in separate firms. So we've seen different firms and how they function. I'll tell you what was the most difficult part, and that's the part that honestly, even 25 years later, I'm still figuring out. It's the business end. We're two creative people who, for a while I was like, okay, why do we need to keep books? And I've actually asked that question once. Why do I need to keep books? I know what comes in, I know what goes out. So actually learning the business part, making sure that things were balanced, that invoices go out on time, that receipts go in, that people are paid, those kinds of things. That was the most painful part of the whole thing. And I think by now I would say that over the past 2 years, I've started to feel comfortable with that.
I think most people, most businesses, they're really good at the craft, not good at the business side. Right.
Right.
And so the
Absolutely.
majority of the people that I meet with are great at that craft, they're great at the trade. But when you start talking books, numbers, marketing, social media,
Right.
whatever it might be, there, it's way off the head. So how do you start teaching yourself? How do you start feeling comfortable with having to do that stuff?
Um, I've read some good books. Probably my favorite one was one called Financial Intelligence, which is a very basic. This is a spreadsheet. This is a balance sheet. This is what cash versus, this, so it's just very basic. And then honestly, I do the bookkeeping in the firm. For a while, I didn't. But part of my learning process and becoming comfortable with this, I took it over. For several years, actually, our son did the bookkeeping, which is kind of interesting. He was working with us, so it was literally, definitely a family affair. Um,
Was that his specialty at that point, or is his?
well, he's always liked numbers. He works in a mortgage field right now, so he's always been the numbers one. So I don't know whose child he is because, he's not an architect, he's not an artist, but he likes numbers. So I'm going, what? But and then the other key thing, and I think this is really important for people to know, is I found a woman that is not a bookkeeper, is not an accountant. She's actually what's called a QuickBooks expert, a QuickBooks consultant. And she came, and I think part of it because she's a woman, and between the two of us, she would sit me down and just really very patiently explain things and then teach me how to do it. Not do it for me, but teach me how to do it. And finding, in some ways, I would say that even though, of course, I pay her, she's a consultant, she's been a mentor when it comes to the numbers and the bookkeeping part. We have our accountant and, we work with him also, but she's more of a mentor on the number side of things. And I'm really appreciative of her. She still to this day comes once a month. If I have any questions, we have a category in QuickBooks that's called suspense. Anything that I have, it just gets put into that. And when she comes in, we bring that up and then we systematically go through it. And it could be anything from what category this is to, I don't know how to handle this particular situation. And she's just been very patient and very knowledgeable.
I think so many people like that. I'll call them your white collar service providers. That's what they're best at. So,
Yeah,
why not ask them a question? A lot of times you don't even have to hire them. A lot of times, buy them a cup of coffee and they'll do something.
right,
Tell me
right.
about the roles between you and your husband and kind of what your strengths and what your weaknesses are, and then vice versa, what his are as well.
When you do an architecture project, there's a whole series of steps that you go through. There's of course, the beginning of the marketing and the client acquisition, and then developing programming, and then schematic design, design development, construction documents, all the way to possibly construction administration. And what we find is that we're very strong in different parts of that whole process. I'm probably better at the marketing. I do a lot of the social media and the marketing. I like people. I like being out there. I like going to events and getting involved with the Chamber of Commerce and things like that. But and I also enjoy very much the programming part. Now, the programming part of a project is probably the part where we work together the most because we like to do what we call charrettes, which are on-site design events. And what happens is he's very good at the quick sketching based on what he's hearing. So he will sit there, we bring all the drawing tools and everything, and then I ask the questions. Again, because I can pull things out and I know which direction to go, what questions to ask. I usually will do some research beforehand and try to get some information. And so for the programming and that initial schematic design, we work together quite closely. Then once from then on, he pretty much takes over design development and the construction documents. The design development, he does a lot of it hands-on. Then when we get into construction documents, we have our guys. Our office is pretty much totally Revit, which is 3D modeling. We still do some CAD, but everybody prefers the 3D modeling. So then we pass it on to the back office, but he's still overseeing everything and the bidding process and everything. And then when it gets to the end, to the construction administration, where construction is starting to happen and site visits need to happen, I then get involved in that because that's my passion. I love going to the job site, work, dealing with the contractors, answering questions on the site. So I really enjoy that. And Joel actually, that's at that point, he's like, okay, I'm done. The design is done. You take it. So it's very clean on what we're very aware, I guess, because we've been married so long, we know what our strengths are, and we don't compete with each other. And I think that's a big thing. We're in this together.
Sure.
And yeah.
So give me an example of when you guys might have fought about something.
Usually it involves my communication social thing, like, why haven't you contacted? You really need to contact so and so, and you really need to clarify this. And he's like, I don't want to do it, and it's like, why do we need to do it? They know it. And I think a lot of it also plays into the way men and women communicate and our expectations. I find that what I want to provide the client as far as being very much in touching the client more frequently is something that I like to do. So those are times when we've disagreed, where I think he probably feels that I'm pushing him to do what is outside his comfort zone, and
is it fair to say that you're an extrovert, he's an introvert? Or you're the people person and he's not as much of a people person?
Yeah, even though he is a people person, but not in that sense. He's very much of a people person in a private sense, with friends and family and, in the office. But as far as in the business world, no, his boundaries are kind of different, set different. I think a big part of it is that culturally we are not. I think I understand this culture better. We're both third culture people, so I think that plays in our favor sometimes, but it also sometimes causes us to have to do a little bit more processing of our relationships with clients, especially.
You talked about auditing yourself, basically, and understanding what you're good at or what you're bad at. How do you know that? How do you know what you're really good at?
I think it's enjoying it. I think is a big part of it. Is it something you enjoy doing? And then are you getting good feedback from it? Do people then say, yeah, what you are producing is exactly what I want? But it has to be both. I guess you could be good at things you don't enjoy, but then should you be doing them?
Right.
And that's a whole other discussion. But I think it's part of it is your gut feeling of, I enjoy this, I think I'm good at it, and then getting feedback. And we tell each other again, when you're in that kind of a relationship, we'll say, this is not your strong point. And we don't take it personal. It's like, okay, you're right. That's not my strong point. I'm not good at, setting limits of, okay, the design process has stopped. I'm like, no, but they want this.
I think self-awareness and enjoying it. I think you're 100% right. Right. I think one of the reasons I think this show is so important is because I'm good at it. I enjoy doing it. I like learning from other people, and I like to be able to distribute this information to people, right? And so I'm not afraid to ask people questions that other people might want to know, but getting to the nitty gritty of it. And so I think it's so important. Is meaningful work a piece of that too? Then, like, do you do work that is more meaningful than not, or how do you kind of qualify that?
Um, that's interesting you ask this because sometimes I feel like where I've been spending a lot of my time is like, okay, the bookkeeping, accounting side of things, is that meaningful? Well, it's not meaningful as in I'm doing a fabulous piece of architecture, producing a piece of art, creating something, but it's meaningful in a different level. So maybe the question is not so much is it meaningful as much as do you value it? And do you consider that it's worth doing because it's important? And I think that making sure that what you're doing, there's a reason why you're doing it. You're not doing it because you're being forced to do it and you don't believe that it needs to be done, but doing it because you believe that it's the right thing to do.
So 25 years in business, when was the last time you did something that you didn't value?
Um, Gosh, I would say probably we've gone through some periods where we've had to make decisions that were tough. Um, that I was going, what the heck are we doing? When you get put in positions where people owe you money and you have to sort of confront or I hate doing that. I hate being put in the position of I did the work, why aren't you paying me? Or why aren't you valuing what we've done for you? Um, and it's almost like you're disrespecting
Yeah.
me and I want to respect you and I don't want to. So that, when things like that happen, you go, how do we, it gets frustrating.
Yep.
It gets very
Absolutely.
frustrating.
I
Yeah.
think that's
Yeah.
one of
So
the
you've been there.
that's never a fun thing to be in, right?
Right.
So recently
Right.
we started this, um, I guess, email campaign that is called Inbox, and it's basically a series of scenarios that businesses ultimately go through, but they don't necessarily want to go through them. Usually hard times, and how do you get through them? And so whether I've gone through them or I've helped a business go through them, we kind of documented the process. And one of them is, what do you do when your client basically tells you they can't pay or they refuse to pay or whatever it is? And it's like a lot of it is crossing your T's and dotting your I's beforehand to making sure that you have that
Right.
stuff set up. And so it's a series of emails that are basically a person saying, hey, Zack, here's this scenario. And then me kind
Mm-hmm.
of documenting the process to do it. If you guys are interested in looking at it, it's startwithhatch.com/inbox. And it's
Okay.
really,
It's not interested. Yeah.
it's so important to not have to go through that though, if you don't. And by having a contract, by having a conversation with someone beforehand, by understanding when you can communicate with someone is so important. And so many people don't do that. It sounds like some of your biggest challenges have been around communication.
Right. And the contract thing was a big thing. There were for many times, and again, this has been, you were asking before, points of conflict, where business was done on a handshake and yeah, we'll start working, and then we start working, and then it falls apart. And that was a very painful lessons learned. So that now we require a down payment. For the longest time, we didn't. It was like, you're good for it. We know you're good for it. Well, you know what? Some people are not good for it. And so you need to have a contract. You have to have something that's signed, a signed piece of paper. And so that has been a painful lesson, but I think a lesson that we have finally learned.
How do you determine what your down payment should be?
We usually do, depending on the size of the project, 15 to 20%.
And that just that number is enough for you to make sure that you're okay in that situation, so you start paying for stuff, and then you do kind of what's your payment schedule typically after that? Prepay,
Well,
or how's that work?
no, because remember, we have all those different stages. And so typically we would invoice throughout the project. So at the end of schematic design, we will invoice. At the end of design development, when the design is approved, we will invoice. And then we break down construction documents to when we submit to the city, we usually get comments back, and then with the final approval of the city. So that's 2 payments on construction documents. So we are doing, smaller payments throughout. We spread it out. That's just the way we find works the best. And it also holds everybody accountable of like,
Sure.
Shows the client that we're holding ourselves accountable too.
Do you wake up every morning with a smile? Are you having fun?
Um,
Taking a while to answer that.
Sometimes
Taking a
than
while to
others.
answer that question.
Am I having fun? I don't know that I'm having fun most days, but I do enjoy it. I enjoy the business.
Okay.
And this is a recent revelation that we've actually recently switched the ownership. This is one of those, a lot of people might not have realized it, but up until about 4 years ago, I was not licensed. Again, because it was Joel and I was like, why do I need to sit through the exams? They're horrible, 7 exams. It's really a long process to get licensed in architecture. And so I was like, I don't want to be bothered. Why do I need it? And then about 4 years ago, it was like, all these years I've been saying I work in architecture, but I haven't been able to say I'm an architect. And so it became, I need to do this. And so, again, thankfully, because of where we were in the business, I got the ability to take the time I needed. For about 3 years, I lived at Panera's or Starbucks, and I studied and studied and studied. And 2 things came out of it. One, I got my license, yay. And 2, I know, and also surprisingly, here we are 25, whatever, 30 years since we had graduated from architecture school, and things have changed. And you try to keep up with it, but actually going through the process of getting the exams, I learned a lot about the latest in architecture. What has happened in structure, what has happened with all of the engineering areas that we don't necessarily do, but we need to know about. What has happened in sustainability, in green design, a lot of those things that we knew, but we didn't really know in depth. So I think that for the firm, it's been actually very good. I have brought all that knowledge now. Then as a result of that, because now I'm an architect, we decided that in order to sort of get things moving and changing so that we didn't settle, we switched ownership. So I became the president of the company. And so I'm now the majority owner. And it changes how you approach things. It's been fascinating. It's sort of like my husband has sort of started backing up a little bit from some of the pressure on him. Some of it has come on me. But what I'm learning is that I'm actually really enjoying that whole looking at the business more as an executive owner, making some decisions. And he's very good at, we talk it all, we talk it out, but he's very good at letting me take the lead on those things. And so what I'm discovering is that I really enjoy business. I really do enjoy running the business in spite of it being sometimes annoying, and not necessarily because it's architecture, but because it's the business part of it I'm enjoying.
Do you know that my ultimate goal is to be a majority owner of an amusement park?
I think that is an awesome goal.
And so it's interesting that you mentioned the difference in architecture in the last 30 years, or whatever it was, 30, 35 years, 25 years. What's interesting is in how things have changed.
Right.
I originally went to school to design roller coasters and realized I wasn't capable of doing it. It was too hard. But now I've realized that as I might be good at business, I might be able to have enough net worth at some point to own the park and then build the ride. So it's kind of the same idea.
Hire the person to design the roller coasters.
Exactly. But what made me think about this is how things do change, right? If you look at a roller coaster 25 years ago, the amount of supports that were necessary for that, because that's what they thought, is very different than the support system of today. And I actually think that's something that you might not have wanted to do. Actually, was a really good and important thing to do, because now the 2018, 2017, 2019 technology strategies, and it seems like it was a really big win for you.
Oh, it absolutely was. It was very hard. It was probably one of the hardest things I've done. It was basically almost like having to go back to architecture
Mm.
school. But I'm really glad I did it. I'm really glad I did it. And the other thing that has come out of it is that I really like to encourage women in the field. There's not a lot of women architects. There are more now than there were. When I was in school, there were very few women architects in architecture school. And it's given me even more of a passion to encourage young women to not only go through the profession, but to then get their licenses. Don't just learn for the sake of learning, which I think many times we women have a tendency to do. Oh, I have the diploma, that's okay. But to actually push yourself professionally and go as far as you possibly can, get licensed, get that paper, and just really go for it.
I think women in general, not just with licenses, not with just becoming executives, not just starting a business, are starting to blossom, if you will, and realize that maybe they don't have to be behind. Why do you think that change is happening? And are you promising? Do you see this as a promising thing that maybe you're going to be able to help women now and girls figure out that, hey, this is something that you can do? Is that something that you're trying to do? Like, because it is weird for me to, because I'm the white male of the situation, so I'm the one who doesn't understand anything, right? So
Right.
so you got women have gone through this for a long time where they wanted to be something and weren't, but now as 2018 is coming on, like, we're seeing that change, and it's really, really cool to see how the most important women in the world are becoming the most powerful people in the world. and
Right,
and
right.
so why do you think that kind of switch is happening in all of this?
I think a lot of it has to do with that there's been enough women that have paved a way. I know that that sounds like a real cliche, but I'll tell you, for example, studies have been done, especially in engineering, in STEM fields, that girls will, throughout school, if you give them the encouragement and whatever, they will try to go for it. They will actually excel in it. They will apply for the universities. But then when they get to either the higher level education or the job place, if there are not other women that are peers, it's very difficult for them to stick it out. Because honestly, it's still, in many of those fields, it's still a man's world. And women, because we are different, we think different, we relate different. When you have other women that are your peers, it's strength. It sort of helps you motivate each other. It goes back to the whole thing about the accounting, and the woman that has been helping me. Some having another woman say, I believe in you. When I was younger, there was this whole concept of women were our, we were each other's worst enemies, and that I think is changing dramatically. I think that women are starting to see that no, we are our best allies, and that is affecting, I think, a lot of the outside world where we're seeing no, we need to back each other up and we need to grow each other, and part of that has come with the self-assurance. If I know who I am and I'm comfortable in my skin, then I don't have a problem helping you become who you are and be comfortable in your skin, because it's not going to affect me. It's not a threat. And it has to do with, again, seeing, having to make a way. I mean, I remember when I was in architecture school, having this one of the fancier design professors, this Italian guy, coming to me and saying, women should not be architects. You should just go into interior design. It was like, even back then, I thought that is just so absurd. You are stupid, but
I love it.
I had it within me that I could sort of like laugh it off and go, you're a jerk, and not take it seriously. But somebody else, and there was a lot of more of that environment, and you don't see that as much, at least not as blatant.
So I'm 33. I was in high school, I don't know, 15, 16, 17 years ago, and growing up through middle school. men, boys went through shop class, and girls, women went through home ec.
Yep.
So we're marketing people to go down a certain path,
Right.
right? So whether that's a good thing or not,
Mm-hmm.
we're telling people to go through this certain path. Guys like Hot Wheels, girls like Barbies, right?
Right.
So are we changing that too?
Um, I think we should give the option because here's the biggest irony of the whole thing. So in your high school, girls were going through home ec, and yet who are the biggest chefs in the world? It's usually men. So it's why don't we just, and I think that is starting to happen. I'm hearing, and I mean, I don't have any kids in high school or anything, but I'm starting to see that you can open home ec to guys and you can open shop to girls. So it's not a matter of changing it, it's just giving the option
Yeah.
that it doesn't automatically you have to go this way. But it's still important to have both. I still think you need to have those two options, but not say only guys do this, only girls do that.
Right. And I don't think it's just about guys doing it and girls doing it, but I do love the point that you made about peers. And if you don't have that peer, if you don't have that someone, there's a great TED Talk that is about 3 minutes long. I think it actually might be the number one TED Talk of all time, where the key is actually the second person. So you have one person that is the leader, and then you have a second person go, and then everyone leeches onto them, and they have this party around it. And I think that's so important. In my high school, I was in shop 4 years. I know there was only guys in shop, right? And I think that if there was more peers, it was just it's like what was socially acceptable. And I think when we remove ourselves from the socially acceptable piece, it's like anything is possible.
Right, and
And finding that peer is
it,
so great.
and you might have had one guy that would have rather be learning how to cook, but if you have two guys, chances are it would have gotten the ball rolling. I think I've seen that TikTok. Is that the one where one person starts dancing and then all of a sudden it's the second person that causes things to happen?
Yeah, on
Um,
like a concert or something.
yeah,
Yeah,
yeah, and so that's where the importance, and it comes down to friends.
yeah,
You have friends that are like you, that like what you like, and then you both decide, let's do this together. It's like we're gonna try and
love it,
take a risk together.
love it. I want to ask you a couple of questions about you and the way that you think, maybe on random things, but I think they really tell a good part about a person. What made you cry last?
What made me cry last?
Good or bad cry?
Um, it was I was watching a video about Spain. I love Spain. Spain is very deep in my heart, and I miss being there. And so it was a cry of longing.
Did you then say, "Hey, I need to schedule a trip to go there"?
It was like I hope that within the next few years I have the ability to go back. Yes.
What's on your bucket list? Is it going back? Is it going back there? Like, what's on your bucket list?
Oh, I have several things on my bucket list. Definitely going back there, but I mean, that's not a bucket list necessarily. Um, Traveling more, going to Paris. I really want to go to Paris. I'd love to go to Egypt. Um, so it's more visiting places, getting out and being in other places that, yeah.
My brother lived in Paris for 5 years. I never showed up.
Shame on
Shame on me, big time.
shame.
Big time shame on me.
Yeah.
College in its current state, 2018, what will it look like in 5 or 10 years?
Where I think it's going to go, or where I wish it
Oh,
was,
well,
they're two very
yeah.
different things.
Yeah,
Okay,
let's
I
hear
think
both.
it's going to go more into that whole um, online distance, but it could also go in the direction that I think it should, and that is more going back to almost the old Oxford type places where there's a lot more of the smaller classes with one professor really getting to know the students. And I think that some of the sadly, it's the more expensive or the more exclusive colleges are starting to go that route. And I think because they realize that there's a need for that.
Is
There's a
that like an
need,
apprentice style? What is the Oxford style?
not necessarily an apprentice style, but it's almost like you have one main person that's your professor, and you meet with a group of people on a regular
No matter
basis.
the topic, no matter the. Got it.
Right, and you're not necessarily in a classroom. You're sitting around and you're talking, and then it will be a lot of discussion. I think that where distance education sometimes has had difficulty, although it is changing, is in the ability to engage live with having the professor and the other students at the same time.
Very cool. What's your favorite book, business or not?
Okay, um, business, I guess that one that I said before, financial
Yep.
intelligence. Non-business, okay, I have two. One is Lilith by George MacDonald. George MacDonald was a Scottish writer. It's a fabulous fantasy book. And the other one is Perelandra by C.S. Lewis. And it's kind of a sci-fi version of the creation story that is just amazing. It happens in other planets. It's,
Very cool. Have you seen Star
yeah.
Wars yet?
The new
Yeah.
one? No, but
You can give
I'm
everyone a
hearing.
spoiler if you have, because this won't air until
No,
November.
I haven't. I haven't seen it out. But it's probably going to happen within the next couple of weeks.
There you
Absolutely.
go. Is there a quote that you live by?
Quote. Um, I would say everybody has worth.
That's good.
I'll never forget that. Everybody has worth. And give everybody the benefit of the doubt. That last one is one that I usually tell my son when he was growing up. Give everybody the benefit of the doubt. Don't assume the worst. Just assume it was a
Yeah.
mistake, there was a misunderstanding, and then
Well, I think even if you're just having bad experience at a restaurant and someone's like, "Well, why is this?"
mhm,
You don't know what that person went through that day, right? And
right.
so I think that's so powerful. And yeah, it's so many people. I mean, someone got a flat tire. Well, could you help them? Like something is like help others, and I think everybody has worth. That's so powerful. Is there a person that you're following that you really like respect what they're doing?
That I'm like on social media.
Or someone in business from before, or is there a female leader that you're like, oh, I really like what she's doing, or it doesn't have to be business or anything like
Right.
that.
There's and of course right now her name just went away, but there's a woman architect. She's she lives in San Francisco, and she's doing a lot of work on trying to get more women in the profession. I really like what she's doing.
If you remember her name, you can say it later.
Yeah, okay, I'll send that to you.
How do you say no?
I actually don't have a hard time saying
Okay.
no in general. Um, I sometimes have a tendency to want to give more, but saying no to people, I think because it frees you, and many times it frees them. No is not a negative just because it's no. Um, Boundaries is an amazing, fabulous concept. Knowing and having boundaries and respecting your boundaries and respecting other people's boundaries. And if you have that clear, then no is not difficult.
That's great. There's a guy, Derek Sivers, who I don't know if you know him, but he created something similar to iTunes before iTunes became mainstream. And he has a quote that says something along the lines of, if someone requests a meeting with you, or if you have to do something and the answer isn't F yes, heck yes, oh my goodness, I really want to do this, then don't do it at all. Because you're going to end up going to this meeting or whatever it might be, and you already have this notion of, I don't want to be here. So then it doesn't even go well. And so I think I love that you don't have that, you're not afraid to say no, and then I love the boundaries piece of that, like really understanding yourself. That's really great. What's your favorite day of the week?
Friday.
Why?
Um, it's a good day to finish things in the office, but then you get to sleep in the next day.
So even though you own a business, are you a typical Monday through Friday 9 to 5 type of person? Like, and do you follow that?
Not 9 to 5, but yeah, typically Monday through Friday. Yeah.
How did you kind of decide your schedule and realize that it's something that works well?
It's very flexible, but honestly, and this is very sad, it's a lot of it revolves. I live in Portsmouth and work in Norfolk. A lot of it revolves around tunnel traffic.
There you go. They say tunnel traffic has changed in that
It
area
has
since they
changed.
put
It
the
has changed.
the new tunnel in.
Yeah, but now they're also making it more expensive.
Double the
So,
price. So
right.
that's interesting. So how do you deal with distractions then?
Like during the
Yeah,
week
during the week
or
or something that like pops up. So, for example, I used to get a lot of notifications on my phone. I realize that I'm very ADD, and if I get notifications, it's not good for me. So I've turned off basically all notifications. So how do you handle distractions? What have you done to improve your
I
life?
haven't figured it out
Uh,
yet. I have a tendency. I'm also ADD, so I do a lot of leaps. Um, sometimes I don't know that it's that bad. As long as you keep them under control and you make sure you go back to what you need to go back to, distractions can be a good break.
sure.
I think actually it's worse to stay so focused that you stay sitting at your desk for hours on end. That's actually worse for you, for your health,
Yeah,
and for everything.
I would agree with that too.
So, yeah, so distractions that then make you get up and do something or change your posture or whatever, that might actually, they're finding is actually probably good for you.
Yeah, I have a theory that most people shouldn't try and be on their A game until they absolutely need to be on their A game. And what I mean by that is if you look at professional athletes, they're not on their A game every single day. They're on their A game when they need to be,
Right,
right?
right,
And so many people are like, oh, I need to be so ready for this thing. And it's like there's a difference between ready, educated, prepared than there is for I need to be the greatest in the world at this thing. And
right.
most people
Yeah,
every day or every week, and maybe not even every month, have to do that. Yet we try to be, and then we burn out.
right, right. And again, a lot of that is like forcing yourself to be so focused and that's just not good.
I 100% agree. How do you set a goal?
Um, as what's the process?
Yeah, or yeah, what's the process? Like, do you have goals that are so crazy and audacious that you might not ever achieve them? Like what's a when you woke up today? Did you know you had to do a couple of things? Like, is there a meaningful goal in the forefront?
Yeah, I sort of have a mental list going. I use reminders a lot. Set up a lot of reminders on my calendar, on my phone.
There's that distraction piece. Boom, boom. I gotta do this now.
Right, right, and then you go 5 more minutes, 5 more minutes, 5 more minutes. So sometimes it's some work better than others. Long-term goals, short-term goals. But sometimes it's just get make sure the work gets done. I must say, deadlines are an amazing motivator, and I usually am the kind that will get incredibly super productive and efficient when we're down to the wire. But I know that, so many times what I'll do is I'll ask people to give me a deadline, and then I'll just play along with it, and just tell me when you need it. Set a date when you need this, and then I know that a lot of it I'm thinking about it. I'm not actively doing anything, but it's mulling. It's simmering. It's simmering. And then when it's time to get it done, then it just happens.
But you're communicating, and I think that's key, so that and you're setting expectations. I think expectations are one of the things that people don't do, and then one person thinks one thing, one person thinks another, and before you know it, boom, there's a collision and something's bad. Several years ago, you moved from Brooklyn to Virginia, and you had a network of probably zero. What were some of the ways that you created a network that's now bigger than the network of zero from a few decades ago?
I think when it came to business, I was very proactive. I chose every once in a while I revisit what organizations I'm involved in and which ones I want to stay involved in. And just I did and get involved. It's not just a matter of joining a group and then showing up just for the meetings, but actually getting more involved in that. I've always been very involved with the chamber. I like the chamber. I like the Norfolk Chamber. Even though we don't live in Norfolk, I actually love Norfolk. I think Norfolk is a great city that's heading in a great direction, and I can't wait to see what happens 10 years from now in Norfolk. I think it's going to be it's becoming a really interesting place. I remember when we first moved here and you did not want to be on Granby Street after dark, and now it's a happening place. Not that I'm there all the time, but I want to encourage those things from happening, not necessarily be in the center of it. But
For an area like Norfolk, we happen to both live in this region. Is it just that people talk about it so much that you then start to believe it?
as far as what transformation,
Yeah.
I think transformation is happening. People have been talking about it, but when you've been around long enough, you are seeing that some of the changes are happening. Um, I'll give you an example about this region. When we first moved here, there were not a lot of Hispanics in this area. There were not a lot of different cultures, and you are seeing a lot more of that. Just that causes huge transformation in an area, and it's not necessarily something that you need to talk that gets talked about a lot, but the variety of people will transform because people bring who they are, and who they are will affect how they relate to you and how they relate to the environment and how they move in the environment. And so that's where planning is important, but welcoming might be even more important. Make sure that it's a place that's a welcoming place for different types of people.
I just learned today, I had a meeting with Jim Carroll, and they have just, I don't know what the word is, transcribed or created an entire series of books, business books, in Spanish, basically.
Mm-hmm.
For the Hampton Roads Small Business Development Center. So I thought that was interesting. And then I asked the question, like, how many, what's the breakdown? How many Spanish-speaking people are there in the region? He was like, a lot. And so, do you know the number? Is there?
No, I don't
Yeah,
know the number. Yeah. And it's an interesting mixture because I think a lot of people tend to make the mistake of putting all Hispanics or Latinos in one big group, and actually it's a very diverse group. People from Argentina are definitely very different from people from Cuba.
sure. I remember growing. I grew up in Northern Virginia, and I'm a white guy. I'm basically the minority. In '02 when I was I was basically the minority because there was just so many different other groups, and it was really cool. Then to move here, where it's very different, I thought
Right.
that was interesting.
But it is changing, even though it
Sure.
is still, I was at a meeting recently and I was looking around and going, this is very homogeneous. Not a lot of variety in here in this group. It's sort of like,
Hmm.
I, yeah, it just caught my eye.
We do need to change that, though, and I think that there's a lot of ways to be able to do it. And number one is to audit and address it, and then make sure that you really push it. There's a group in Oregon called Rain Eugene, and they say if you're not making the change, you're allowing basically the continuation of the status quo to happen. And so they're constantly saying, looking at this and say, for example, there's 10 people in the room. If it's 10, 75-year-old white guys, there's a problem. And if you're
Right.
not making sure that that group is diverse in as many different demographics as possible, you're to blame. And so they constantly are making sure and addressing that, which I think is really, really cool. And to make sure that, it changes. Because I think a lot of times this region doesn't do that.
But again, it doesn't need to be, we want one Hispanic to join this group. It's more like, oh, there's a Hispanic that I really would like to invite.
I,
And I think there's different, it's a difference in how you approach it.
sure.
It's not adding
Don't just
numbers.
add to add. I agree. But oftentimes there are groups that say, oh, we want to encourage young professionals to do X, Y, Z, and then there's no young professional in that group to even hear from.
Right.
So make sure that
Well, and And many times it's because the young professionals don't want to do XYZ. And it's the older people who are saying, oh, we should have them do
Well, that's
XYZ.
why they should have that conversation.
Right. That's why they should just let them come in and then let them decide what they want to do. Maybe it's ABC.
We need to start the Georgie and Zack show because this would be great.
Absolutely. We should.
What is a pet peeve of yours?
Um, it goes back to the giving the benefit of the doubt. I hate it when people get angry at others and just for stupid things. You know, if the waitress forgot to bring you lemon in your water, it's really not a big deal.
It's not a big deal at all.
Really isn't. And, don't get offended or, there was a delay in getting stuff or going back again. I just don't be so self-absorbed. It's not all about you. I think people who are so totally self-absorbed that they try to make everything about them is very annoying. It's very annoying.
I love that. That's great. Don't be so self-absorbed. What's something about you that we haven't talked about that maybe we should have? Or something that you've done that most people don't know about you?
Mm. Um, I don't know. One thing I would like to say is I think that, and it goes back to that whole different perspectives and men and women. I would like to say that I think one thing I bring to the field of architecture that I wish I could have other people understand is the concept of architecture is not about buildings. Architecture is about space. And it ties to something a lot of people don't know. There was a time early on that I was a semi-professional dancer. And so the concept of moving in a space, it's actually one of the senses that are not labeled in the five senses, but your ability to realize that you're in a space and that you're occupying space is actually a sense. And people sort of don't realize that they have it, but architecture is about that, about going into a space and what is that space doing to you. It's not just about building an enclosure that's cool looking or not cool looking. It's you're creating more of an experience. And for me, that's I like creating an experience, and I enjoy creating, whether it's in writing. I like writing poetry, I like writing stories, and it's all about that ambience and environment and just how people occupy this world. Nobody can occupy the space you're occupying but you. And that's incredibly powerful if you think about it. Nobody else can you take this space except me.
I think that's where we have to stop it because that was incredible. Georgie, I appreciate your time. Episode
Zach.
71 of the 1004 show. Looking forward to an ongoing relationship with you. Hey, thanks for watching this episode of the 1004 show. I want to tell you guys about something that we just released that we're super passionate about. It's called Inbox. It's a series of scenarios that business owners have inevitably had to go through. And what do they do when they go through these? Stuff like, what happens when you get a bad review on social media? Or more deadly, what do you do when a customer tells you that they can't pay you for the work that you've done? Check it out in the show notes or at startwithhatch.com/inbox.